Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat some of the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry of writing and publishing. And today we are very, very honored to welcome a special guest, David Stanley, who is an author, a podcaster, former pro cycler, soccer enthusiast. All sorts of ways to describe you. How are you doing, David?
I'm well, thanks. Here I am sitting in Flint, Michigan in the midst of what appears to be quite a big storm blowing in, and the leaves are flying around and the wind's flying around, and quite, in a nature sort of its November way, it's a beautiful morning. I'm excited to do this show, by the way.
Oh, well, we're excited to have you. We're very, very happy to have you, especially joining us so early in the morning.
I'm good to go.
We wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Roland, and thanks for coming on, David. I've got this is my first episode in my new office, so I've cleaned up my background now. My fake background that I've had for almost 150 episodes to hide the mess that was behind me. But hopefully that will not become a mess in the future. And if all of a sudden you see that I start using my background again, you'll know that I couldn't maintain the cleanliness. So thanks for coming on. So this is, we wanted to talk to you about the idea of pitching your novels and your work, right? This is something that you are very familiar with. You've done a lot of pitches, and this is, one of those topics that we haven't covered a lot, and a lot of authors, self-published authors, don't necessarily ever have to pitch themselves. But there are times where you do, and there's some of the listeners that are, looking to get more traditionally published or to get different kinds of deals where they would have to pitch themselves. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself as an author and the pitching you've done, and what it's good for. There's different things it's good for, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, the idea, especially in the self-published world, that you don't have to pitch yourself, I think is a little bit of a misnomer, because you really do. You might not be pitching agents. You might not be pitching most of us who have self-published. I have not, but in a way, I shouldn't say that. I do have one self-published essay collection. The thing about pitching is everything is selling. Right? Whether you are self-publishing and using any of the really great platforms that are out there right now or not, at some point or another, you're going to have to put yourself on the line and get people to buy your stuff. Right? I mean, the thing about becoming a self-published author or a traditionally published author, there is a fair amount of overlay, because it comes down to legacy. You want to leave something behind. And if you are not willing to pitch yourself into the public eye as a self-published author, you're not going to sell very many books. You have the satisfaction of putting a book out there in the public domain, and you get your ISB number and all that stuff. And I got to admit, it's really cool when you see that and you're like, oh my God, I am literally a published author. It's an ecstatic feeling for a while, and then it's kind of contented. But if you don't sell any of those self-published books of yours, except maybe to, mom and grandma and a few other friends, you're not doing it right, because the reason why you wrote is you love to write, and you put an immense amount of work into what you did, right? Whether you're traditionally published or self-published, that project consumed you for a really long period of time. You have got an immense amount of your soul and your blood and your work in that project. And then all of a sudden, one day you wake up and you realize 9 people have bought this book. I spent 2.5 years of my life writing this goddamn thing. It's worth reading. Why? What am I doing that I need to do more of to get people to buy that book? So what I have to say gets out into the public domain. And that's the real reason why, folks, if you're watching this show and you're interested in self-publishing, you should probably be thinking about how to do all of this stuff. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You started to say something.
I was going to say that's a good point. You're right. I'm thinking, when I think pitching, I'm thinking of that traditional thing where you're, trying to pitch yourself to an agent or to a publisher or to
right.
whatever. But you're right. You can look at pitching as any kind of selling yourself, of promoting yourself, of putting yourself out there. And so, yes, and from that perspective, absolutely, self-publishers do have to pitch themselves.
Right. One of the things that I've learned I actually have a presentation that I've done for writers groups and for all sorts of other groups, especially during the pandemic when we were all trying desperately to maintain some kind of connection with other humans, is I put together a seminar called Master Pitch Theater, which is obviously a blatant ripoff of Masterpiece Theater, from years ago on PBS and all of that. But essentially, it takes you from ground zero to hopefully landing an agent, selling the books, getting another outlet. And one of the key takeaways as you pitch yourself, you have to make sure, and I've got a list of talking points here, so I'm going to just kind of like start with the very first one. There aren't any life hacks to this. This is work. If you're looking for the quick, the easy way of getting your book out in the public eye, I'm going to have to tell you, kids, that ain't the way the world works. There is no quick. There is no easy. It is work. The other day, I'm pitching a novel right now. It's my first novel. My other two books were pretty well received. They were published through small presses. And like my Melanoma book was my very first book. We've sold close on to 10,000 copies of it since 2016. It's called Melanoma. Wow. It started with we sold a lot because I got with a publisher and he wasn't a traditional health book publisher. He's actually, and he's become a very good friend. He actually has sites. He has a site called bikeraceinfo.com, which is a worldwide repository for a lot of bicycle racing information, whether articles and up-to-date stuff and history and coaching and all of that very cool stuff. Well, it turns out that bike racers who spend a lot of time outdoors have a very high rate of melanoma. No surprise, right? When you spend a lot of time out in the sun, and Roland, you're a ginger, you know this, and I used to be kind of a brownish ginger in Auburn. We know that most of us didn't wear sunscreen when we were younger. And as a result of getting with the correct small publisher, and that's something else we can talk about a little bit, is it doesn't always have to be a big five publisher. There are a lot of indie presses out there and small publishers that are really anxious to get good stuff to sell. They're kind of the overlooked sort of middleman, if you will, in this whole process. But because Bill was so good about getting the word out for my book, and it had a ready audience. Look, a bike racer who developed melanoma. I've already had 3 operations for squamous cell. I should buy this book. Right? So you have to learn to, it's an overused phrase, but it is true, outside the box. You have to learn you are a small business person, Mr. and Mrs. and Ms. Self-published author. You are a small business. And the sooner you realize that, nobody knocks down your door looking for your stuff. Just like everybody else in retail, you have to find customers for your product. But that's all part of the process. That's the fact that there is no life hack for any of this crap. We love what we're doing. That keeps us going every day, even when we don't feel like doing it. We feel like we got to get our message out there. But there's not going to be any quick, any easy, any life hack. It's not like, oh, look, I need to buy a new water heater. I think I'll buy a tankless one because it'll save me $600 a year. I know this because I just did that. But that's the truth. That is a life hack. There is no such thing as a life hack for what we're talking about here or anything else worthwhile. You're going to have to put in the hours, and you're going to have to be smart because our time as humans is limited. We have families, we have day jobs, we have to take care of ourselves. We got to get to the gym. We got to make sure we get enough sleep. We got to do all of that really good stuff. So the sooner you organize yourself and your self-publishing business, and your pitching is a part of that, as a business person, the better off you will be. You block out, the hour and a half that you have every day, the 3 hours that you have, the 30 minutes that you have, whatever it is, block that out and schedule it. Can we talk about social media for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me throw this out there. One of the single best things I've ever done, and this is just in the last month, is I've shut myself almost entirely off from social media in a free form way. I literally schedule a fixed amount of time on social media. One of the things I was finding out was I was wasting an immense, and I mean immense, really, amount of time thinking I was reaching out to people and building the platform and all of those things that you sort of need to do. Well, the thing is you lied. We all lie to ourselves about our social media involvement. We think it's really, really important, and it is, but it needs to be every bit as focused as every other part of your business plan. Whatever medium, and I'm no pun intended because I'm actually on Substack, whether it's Medium or Substack or vocal.media.com or something. There's a lot of sites out there that you can use to post your stuff and build engagement, but you have to do that in a very focused way. There's a ton of apps, and I don't want to recommend any because I'm not an app sort of guy. There's a ton of apps that you can download that will log how much time you spend on social media. And if you use that thing for a week, you will be shocked at how frequently you just waste away time scrolling through stuff. So you need the social media. It is the single best tool for small authors, small businesses like us to get the word out about it. But you also need to use it in a very focused and disciplined way. And don't lie to yourself. And we all do that. What you're doing at that particular moment on social media is really important to, 3 more book sales, because it isn't. Use it, make those connections. The single best thing you can do, I'm just like, boom, 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 but
hey, you're getting a lot of information across in a rapid fashion, which I think people appreciate. We're writers, our brains work fast.
My wife, it makes my wife crazy sometimes. She's like, dude, I have no idea what was going on inside your head before those words came out of your mouth, which is her nice way of saying, what WTF are you trying to tell me here? That happens a lot.
Yeah, I think you probably got a bit of ADD going on there, like the rest of us over here.
Okay, good. So I'm my people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talking a little bit about the social media thing, and I really, if you log on to Threads or Blue Sky, or any of the micro blogging sites. I was doing a haiku prompt on Threads, and her name was, I think, Ann Kerrigan, and I believe she was from maybe Sarnia. I forget, somewhere in Ontario, relatively close to me. And every morning at 7 o'clock, a haiku prompt gets popped up there. And I get up at 7 o'clock anyway, so I would wake up, and literally the first thing I would do was click on Threads, open it up, and look at the haiku prompt. So I would start thinking about, those 17 syllables that I was going to post. Well, it was fun. Was it productive? Did it help me? Yeah, no, it really wasn't. I mean, I am a poet. I work primarily in sonnets. I've written, I've written 382 sonnets since 2019.
Oh, wow.
My dad,
Shakespeare. Yeah. More than Shakespeare.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, dstanley.substack.com or something like that. What happened, and this is another segue. What happened was in 2019, in January, my dad died. And my dad and I were tight. Not everybody has a really good relationship with one or both parent, but my dad and I were really good friends, and I missed him a lot. And I started writing a little bit about him, and it came out as poems. And then I thought, I've never written a sonnet. I should write a sonnet. And I started writing sonnets about my dad's death and my experience. Like, I helped him with his last shower 3 days before he died. 85-year-old man, who used to be this very vibrant, and I mean, like all of us, and then of course, when we get old, it's what happens. And it was just the most breathtaking privilege of my life to help my dad take that last shower, and he knew he was dying. He decided to stop taking or to stop doing his dialysis. He was a physician. And he said, I'm tired of waking up like shit every day and knowing that's the best I'm going to feel. And so he decided bravely, and, you know, I've supported him, of course, 100% with that he was going to end his dialysis. And it worked out great. I mean, we literally threw him a party every night for like 2 weeks. You know, I want sushi. All right, we'll get you sushi. I want some lox and bagels and cream cheese and a cheesecake. All right, we'll get you lox and bagels and, you know, cream cheese and a cheesecake. He got to say goodbye to everybody, and we got to say goodbye to him. And so it was, in a way, pretty cool. I mean, we would all like to go that way standing up on our own 2 feet. So anyway, I help him bathe, and I write this poem, and I turned it into a sonnet. And it just kind of took off from there, because I figured out later that the sonnet, because it is so clearly delineated what it is, you know, you get 10 syllables, very specific rhyme scheme, you get 14 lines, you know, stanza, 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 which kind of explains the first 2 stanzas, and then the 2 lines at the end, that it was an attempt to kind of put some form and discipline into something that we really have no control over. You know, none of us have any idea when we're going to die. We want to maximize the living that we do while we're alive. And when it happens, you know, when we finally do die, it's it. I mean, you know, my days writing sonnets when that happens are over. And so working in that really disciplined field in that particular poetic form really helped me work through a lot of the stuff about my dad, about the grief and the sadness and the joy, all of that. And I absolutely forget where I was going with all of this. Help me out here. What the hell was I talking about?
Well, I mean, one thing you had mentioned is I mean, I don't know if this was leading into that, but the idea of, you know, you were doing all of those poems and they weren't necessarily, you know, doing anything for you, which I think is
right, yeah,
important point for people to realize.
Yeah.
That at some point you have to evaluate the things that you're doing and
Right.
figure out whether or not they're leading to your end goal, right?
Yep, that's exactly. And so I write a lot of them, obviously, and I pitch them to literary magazines, and a fair number of them have been published. But the thing is, right now, you know, I'm trying to sell this novel of mine in a traditional sort of way, and I've become very, very organized as a result of the discipline that I learned. That's where I was going. It was about discipline. The discipline that I learned writing those sonnets, I've become very, very organized in terms of what I do in pitching this manuscript, which is, you know, I really want to be published in a traditional publishing sort of way, because this is a book about, it's called Consider the Goat. It's about 2 men who bump into each other in a cemetery, and one of the men has a goat for a pet. And we don't know any of the story, but excuse me, about why he has a goat or why he's in the cemetery yet. We do find out about all of those things. And our narrator, who is pretty reliable, becomes an incredibly close friend to this man who, as it turns out, has faced an immense number of challenges, both of his own making and generational trauma that has been handed down from his father. And the tagline is that a man's friendships will save his life. And the discipline that it takes to do that sort of pitching is really, really significant. You know, you have to set aside that time every day, whatever you have available to you, and set down what you're going to, what is the day's task, and what do I have to accomplish in order to say, yes, I've managed to complete that mission. There's a lot of military style planning, and I'm not a military guy. I never served. I don't come from a family military tradition at all, but a lot of that sort of that mission planning and accomplishment is very, very useful for anybody who's involved in pitching stuff. One of the things that I would recommend really, really highly is using your existing network. Almost everybody has a network. Some of it's online, some of it's in the real world, Most of us, it's a combination of both. And for most of us, it stretches across several continents now. If you guys were in a Reddit group together, you absolutely have friends from across the world, literally across the globe, that share a lot of the same interests. And here's the thing that most people don't realize. Almost everybody likes to help. If there's one thing I could say, I actually have two things that have to be said. One, and that is the number one thing. Just ask. Almost everybody who is in a position to help, if it's a good time for them, will help you. And that help takes a lot of different forms. Maybe they know somebody. Maybe they know somebody who knows somebody. We are, the world, as that book said, as that economics book said, is very flat. And most of us are no more than 2 or 3 connections away from somebody who can quite literally make or break the success of your project. And when you're pitching stuff, you can send out 1,000 pitch letters about something, or reach out to virtually every public radio station in the country. But you might, in order to get, because every public radio station has a book chat program, right? I mean, that's my experience. We've got every university here in Michigan has some sort of book chat program. And you probably know somebody who knows somebody that can get you in and ask with somebody on that particular program to talk about your book. So that's sort of rule number one, is just ask. And
yeah, I mean, we're all 6 degrees away from Kevin Bacon too, right? So
absolutely. Yeah, right. I'm literally 1 degree from Kevin Bacon. I found out not long ago.
Oh,
yeah, my sister.
You can make that call. And
get a hold of Kevin and Kira. Hang out.
Like I think that is one of those things that a lot of people are sort of wary about, is asking their friends and family to help them out and their social circles to help them out. I mean, some people will do it, but others just feel like, oh, they don't want to impose, be a burden, whatever. But you're right. I think that if you do it, people are willing to help you, whether or not it comes in the form of knowing somebody or whatever, or buying the book, or just talking about it in their own social media and say, hey, my friend wrote this book, and then they have their own set of people that you didn't have, right? And it just builds from there.
Yep. Just ask. It's an incredibly powerful 2 words. And like I said, most people, if it is convenient for them at that time, will be happy to help. And most of them will say, I can't do that for you right now, but get back with me, when XYZ has happened, and I'll be happy to put you in touch or to do what what you're asking me to do. We are social animals, right? I mean, I've been talking to you guys for 10 minutes before the show started, and I'm like, I have every confidence if I called Roland up in another 6 months and said, hey, I got this idea, Roland would be like, oh, hit me with that idea. I want to hear about it. And the same goes in the other direction. Hey, can you do this for us? Can you put it? We saw in your post that so-and-so, left a comment. We would really like to have that author on our show. Can you put me in touch with them? Of course I can. The rising tide that lifts all boats, you're part of the all boat brigade. And we all sense too that we're kind of underdogs in this, right? Like you said, I don't remember if it was at the very start of the show or before we went on the air, that we're not all Stephen King. But we wouldn't necessarily mind having a little piece of that being Stephen King. We would all like to sell a crap ton of books because we love to write, and we rightly so feel that what we put down on paper is important and will touch people. And that's kind of why we do this, right? To touch people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's the thing, and you can say, oh, you're a writer if you publish a book, you're a writer if you self-publish a book. Really, it's, do people read it? Do people talk about it? Does it resonate with people? And you don't necessarily, I mean, from a commercial perspective, there's a guy called Nick Stevenson who says, you only need 10,000 readers, which might sound like a lot, but actually 10,000 people in the great scheme of things is nothing to make a living from writing. But more than that, if you can reach one person, like sometimes I get emails from readers and like, I was going through cancer and I read your book and it made me feel things. And I'm like, wow, what I wrote actually moved somebody to that point. And that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, that resonance piece is just the single best thing about being a writer. I don't push the melanoma book all that much anymore. I wrote it in 2016, but for a while when I was actively working really hard at getting the word out about that book, um, I would get at least a message a week from somebody who said, "Oh, my friend gave me this book." Or I saw this and, I bought the book or whatever, and I went and got a skin check and because I had something weird on my face. And I got that skin check because you wrote a lot in that book about weird things on your face. And fortunately, it was nothing. But I want to thank you for getting me into the dermatologist. That would happen like once a week. And then probably 6 or 8 times in that 2-3 year period, I got messages that said, I got a skin check, I got melanoma, but I got it really early. And thank you for waking me up. And like you said, all you need is that. And it's just this immense feeling of satisfaction that I don't know if you guys have kids. I'm kind of assuming you do, but it kind of like when you watch your kid do something really cool, it's not quite that good, but it's pretty good, isn't it?
I like that analogy. I like that analogy a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that's books are our children. I don't know. I didn't really think about that before it came out.
So in terms of pitching though, like what's your advice for the way that people should go about their pitch?
Yeah.
What do you need to say and include? And I assume that it's different depending on where you're doing the pitching and who you're doing the pitching to.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely it is. But it still kind of comes down to writing 3 really good paragraphs. Hemingway said, write the truest sentence you know. And writing a really good query letter or pitch letter, if I can continue to use that public radio analogy, because they're such good supporters of the written arts. If in the first paragraph, write what you think is the single most compelling thing about your project, about your book, whatever the thing is that. If I was, it's almost like the classic elevator pitch, right? Where you've got 30 seconds to interest this person in what you're selling, and what you're selling is your book. What is the single most compelling thing about this? Is it the 2 characters that are interacting? Is it the goat that's standing on the headstone when the guy wanders past? Is it the green light that's at the end of the dock? We've all read that book, of course. Is it the old man trying to catch this big fish? What is the single most compelling thing about your book? That's paragraph 1, because if you don't catch their attention in the first couple sentences, you're not going to you can't rescue yourself from that. Item 2, paragraph 2, I should say, what gives you the right to write this stuff? That is actually my item number 2 as well, where I said number 1's just ask, number 2 is master the craft. If your book isn't really good, you got a problem.
Yeah.
That's really, it kind of comes down to that, right? If you haven't gotten feedback from readers, if you aren't, like in my case, I'm actually an English teacher. I was a science/English teacher, and I have English teacher friends. If your book isn't good, if it's not interesting, if it's not syntactically, grammatically correct, if it's hard to follow, if you're not, none of us are masters of the craft. Let's be honest. Every writer is always trying to be better. None of us.
Well, Hemingway said we are all apprentices in a craft of which no one becomes a master.
Exactly right. Yeah. I read stuff in my melanoma book, which I thought was pretty good at the time. I'm like, oh my God, what the hell was I think? What, that needed to come out. But master the
never
craft.
Read your old stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So if your book, what is it about your book that is compelling? Paragraph 2, why did you write this? Is it good? What gives you the right to say you should read this book? That's paragraph 2, which is a nuanced way of saying, what's your writer's biography? You know, we all have a writer's biography. My stuff has been published and blah, blah, blah. I write about blah, blah, blah. And, you know, in my daytime job, I'm a blah, blah, blah. That's nice. Big deal.
Yeah, I mean, just take your book about your melanoma. It's like, if I wrote that, even though I'm ginger, but I've never experienced that, then people will be like, why is this guy who's never experienced this writing a book about it? You have to have the authority. I think that's where they say, write what you know. It's like, you can write stuff that you don't know in terms of imagination, but it has to come from an authentic place.
Absolutely. That is a key. And both of you have used two really strong words that I really like a lot. Craig, you've mentioned, and actually Roland has said this too. You both said resonate. And that's a really key phrase. And the other is, you know, write, essentially, Roland, as you just said, write what's authentic. So that's paragraph 2. And paragraph 3, and this is like classic sales stuff. And I would advise every single person who watches this to get a copy of Daniel Pink's book, To Sell is Human. It is phenomenal. Not only is Pink a tremendous writer, one of my favorites, he's entertaining and he's engaging and he's informative. It validates a lot of what we have to do as indie writers. Most of us don't like the idea of selling stuff. You know, I mean, I don't know what you guys do for your day jobs, but a lot of people who aren't in sales oriented positions really don't like the idea of, oh, I don't want to sell it. Well, then, you know, you're going to sell 3 copies of the book to your mom, you know, your mother-in-law, and, you know, like a friend up the street. Get over yourself. Everything is sales. You know, I had to pitch myself to you guys, right, to get on the show. That's selling.
You're absolutely right. And I think that's with self-publishing. The opportunity that self-publishing provides you is that you can bypass the publisher, the gatekeeper, who says, we are not interested in your book, we don't think it's commercially viable. But then you take on that responsibility to find the audience for your book, to package it as professionally. And I think people like Craig and I, who got started in self-publishing, we had enough confidence in our ability to get good covers, good blurbs, hire an editor, write books that people want. We were confident that we could produce a product that was equal in value to what traditional publishers put out. And if you cannot do that, then you're not going to necessarily succeed. It's
you're not just good writers, you are good businessmen as well. And that's a key thing. And that takes you to like the 3rd paragraph of what I'm talking about. The 3rd paragraph is where you get the chance to provide a call to action. You know, what is it that you want the reader of this pitch letter to do? You know, do you want, and it all depends, you know, are you, like I said, are you trying to get on the radio show? You know, give them a compelling reason to have you on the show. You know, if you're pitching yourself to get, you know, to a book fair, which is a really common way and a useful way for a lot of indie authors and a lot of self-published authors to get a local following for their writing, you're going to have to tell a compelling story. And if you're not a good storyteller, I got to wonder what you're writing about, but that's a whole different thing, at least in the fiction world. So tell them a compelling story. Tell them why you are the person that they should pay to read the compelling story, and then tell them to do something with the information that you just gave them. And that's really, and that's all kind of boiled down from stuff that I've learned through my own personal experience and things I've read in books like To Sell is Human. I'll give you a couple numbers that are kind of interesting. My melanoma book, it was the 72nd pitch letter that when I found a publisher.
Wow.
72.
It always surprises me, the number, and yet I've heard similar authors say similar things. You know, 100 pitch letters, 126 pitch letters. So, yeah.
Yep. The second book I wrote with a fellow. He was an African-American gentleman. I grew to love him like an uncle, Willie Artis. He grew up in the Jim Crow South in Memphis, Tennessee. He was born in 1935, and he became a multimillionaire industrialist here in Flint, working with General Motors. He was on Barack Obama's Minority Business Council, and he hired me to write his biography with him. It's called From Jim Crow to CEO, the Willie Artist Story. That actually went a little bit easier. There's a significant market out there, and this could be a whole nother show because I sense we're kind of bumping up against the end of time. There's a significant market out there for very specific minority publishing. There are small publishers, indie publishers that you can work with that are very eager to work with LGBTQ authors, to work with African-American authors, to work with Latinx authors. There are publishers that is who their niche is. And I found one of them, AUX Media in Detroit, 60 miles down the road, on like the 27th or 28th query letter I sent out about this finished manuscript. And we hardly had to change a thing. They loved it. It sells every year. And I was so honored to take part in that. Now, here's the other thing. Those were nonfiction. And there's almost no crossover between the world of fiction and nonfiction when it comes to trad publishing and the people who do it. I am at 204 query letters for my novel right now.
Yeah. Novels are tough.
Very tough market right now. It is not a traditional rom-com. When you go into the bookstore and you see all those tables out front with those pastel flower books, and I'm glad people are reading. That's not what my book is about at all. It's much darker in spots, much funnier in spots, but it's not that. And that's what's selling right now. So that's what a lot of people want. But I also know that this is a book that will literally save men's lives in particular, because it's about men and friendship. So that brings us kind of to the last thing as we're bumping up against that 45-minute thing. You're going to hear no a lot, folks. Hundreds and hundreds of no's. I can't say it any more plainly. And that is true in every creative industry. Talk to any 25, 26-year-old who's living out of the back of the van with his 3 best mates and a trailer full of amps as they tour trying to get a recording contract. Talk to any young artist or old artist for that matter. Every creative endeavor, you're going to hear no. You're going to hear probably 1,000 no's for every yes. I'm pretty successful at pitching my poetry to literary magazines, and I fail 20 times for every one that I get. I get a yes. And I've sold, 30 or 40 sold, not given away, made money, maybe not much, but made money with those sonnets. And I hear just an immense amount of no's. And if I can offer one piece of advice about that is learn to separate what you do from who you are. Because if I took those 200 no's to heart, I don't know what I would do. I mean, it would be just utterly soul crushing. Every time I get a no, quite literally, in my head, I would never say this out loud. I say, well, fuck you then. To the person who sent me that, you're going to be sorry when I'm standing up there accepting the Man Booker Prize in England for the novel of the year that you turned this down. Every time I say that in my head. And then, but literally what I just do is go, okay, next. You're going to have to collect the no's.
I started my career in sales selling radio advertising, which shows how old I am. But I learned it from a guy called Gifford, who's like one of these sales gurus from the 90s or thing. And he said, sales or anything is a series of defeats followed by the occasional profitable victory. And that's it. It's a number. Yeah. It's kind of a numbers game, but it's not a numbers game is in just doing the numbers. You got to find the right people to shoot your shot at.
Yeah, absolutely. You do. I use both Query Tracker and the American Association of Literary Agents website, and they list out who is, which agents are looking for what kinds of books. And so, I can whittle down that, I don't know, there's probably 2,000 maybe agents, 2,400 agents in the country and in Canada, because there's a couple that have been interested from Toronto and another one from out in Vancouver. And I pick out who seems like the most likely candidate. And one of the great ways to do that, of course, is your favorite books. Find out who agents for that particular author, and drop that into your pitch letter too. And I could say the same thing, that if you have some sort of connection that personalizes the pitch, please use it. It's not being deceitful. I read so-and-so's book, XYZ. I loved it. My book is, and then you start into your particular pitch as well, using that as a springboard as to why that's the compelling reason. My book is a lot like that. You successfully agented that. And you can segue that same kind of thing as a self-published author as well, when you're reaching out to try and increase the people that are going to be interested in your product. So, master the craft. Learn that no is, it's just like you said, it's just another step.
I think that's what a beautiful sentiment to wind things up on. Sorry, Craig.
I'm just going to say no from one person does not mean you're going to get no from the next one, right? So that's why you got to keep going. It's just, everybody's got their own particular needs at the time. You might hit a publisher that typically publishes your work, but at the time they have too many of that type of book. And so that might be why you get the no, right? And then you go to the next one and they don't have enough, and then you'll get your yes. So you don't give up just because you hear no.
Yeah, I talked to my buddy who published my melanoma book on the phone 2 nights ago. We just like to, I do a lot of writing about bicycle racing for his website. And he said, so how's the novel going? Because he doesn't do fiction. And I said, I'm up to 200. He goes, good for you. He's and because he understands what that's all about. He started from scratch, an immense U.S. Importing business in the bicycle business. Torelli Imports was one of the largest importers of high-end bikes from Japan for many, many years, and he got out of that. So he's a sales guy, and he knows how important it is to hear no a lot on the way to yes. He looked at me, he said to me over the phone, he goes, "You're fucking relentless." And I said, "I'm relentlessly optimistic, Bill." He goes, "Yeah, that's it. Let's go with that."
Well, you know what? The only thing that differentiates a successful self-published author from an unsuccessful one is just that tenacity, that sheer unwillingness to surrender. And I think that's something we all share.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you mastered the craft? Do you have a good book? Okay, good. Now, should people want to read it? Yes, they should, because if it's within the genres that they like.
Yeah.
Because there's so many good things out there to read. What's your particular area? Like, I love Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, one of my favorite books of all time. Yeah. So, but I'm not a big sci-fi or fantasy kind of guy. It's just not my thing. But that doesn't mean what the sci-fi fantasy guy or woman is writing isn't worthwhile. It's just not my. So if you have written that book and it's really good and really entertaining, dear God, get the word out. Get that book out there so that people can read it. Because none of us are in this for the money. Like you said, none of us are Stephen King. We're not going to get that big house in Maine and that island in Hawaii, outside of Hawaii. We're doing this because we like having people read our stuff and sending us nice emails that say, that really resonated with me. Thank you for doing that. It's a great feeling.
Oh, well, what a wonderful sentiment to wrap up. Craig, before we finish up, do you have anything else to say? But then we're going to ask you, David, to give us all the information about where people can find out more about you and everything you do. But over to Craig again very quickly.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, this is really helpful. It's always useful for other authors to hear not only, the tips and the ideas for pitching, but another author talk about that they get that they get rejection, and it's not just them, and it's a normal part of the process.
That's so good.
There's so many, especially self-published authors that just they hear those no's, they don't know enough about it, and they just think, oh, I've been rejected and nobody likes it, and I gotta give up, right? And like you said, if you have a good book, if you have a good product, you'll still hear the no's, but you'll eventually get the yes, and you'll eventually see success and keep trying. So thanks for coming on and telling us.
Oh, my pleasure. I have to say this real quick. It popped into my head. I was at a writers conference, and I was one of the speakers. And after we had done our, the breakout sessions, and I had spoken to some people, I was sitting on the dais next to a ex-NFL quarterback, a fellow named Eric Hippo, who wrote a breathtaking book about his son's suicide and the plunge it sent him down, and how he tried to kill himself as well. He literally tried to jump out of a moving car as his wife was driving him to the airport. And Eric is just a kind and wonderful guy. And we're sitting up on the dais as a kind of a Comic-Con side, a open panel sort of thing. And this guy stands up and he starts talking about how horrible, and this is an NFL quarterback. There's 30 of them in the world, right? And somebody said, you know, I've got this idea for this book and I've written the manuscript and I've pitched it 4 times and I'm about ready to quit. And Eric and I looked at each other and just burst out laughing. And the guy's like, what's so funny? And Hipple goes, I'm a freaking NFL quarterback. And it took me like 100 tries to find somebody who wanted to publish my novel about my goddamn son killing himself and how I tried to kill myself.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. It took me 100 tries. You know, we're literally, I mean, we didn't mean to laugh at this guy, but you know, it's even if you're famous as Eric Hipple is, if you guys Google Eric Hipple, you'll see he's the real deal. It's very, very hard work. Do it because you have a deep and abiding sense of what you have put out there into the world is really worthwhile and will change somebody's life or entertain the hell out of them.
I like that. Oh, well, David, where can people who've been enthusiastic about what you said find out more about you, find out more about your books?
Well, I am on Threads at dstan_58. dstan_58, because somebody else wanted dstan58, which is where I usually am found. I'm not so much on Twitter anymore, although I still have the account. I'm on Blue Sky now. I joined that a week or two ago.
I don't even know what Blue Sky is.
It's supposedly a slightly nicer version of Twitter and Threads. I mean, Threads is actually a very positive platform. I'm at dstan58. My Substack, gotta check the window here. So D Stanley, like Stanley is like the tool company, DSTANLEY.substack.com. I have poetry up there. I have writings for blogs and magazines that I've reposted. I've got excerpts up there. I just posted a bunch of excerpts from my melanoma book. I've posted some bits and pieces from my Consider a Goat manuscript, so you can see what that's all about. If either of you two guys would like to read the PDF, I would be honored to send you a copy of Consider the Goat for you to read. It's kind of fun in spots. It's kind of dark in spots. It ends, I'll tell you, no spoiler alert. It ends on a good note, but it looks like it might be ending on a very bad note for a while. And that actually is an alternative ending that I wrote, but I decided that's not me. And I needed to end it on a positive note, not the bad note. So dstanley.substack.com, at dstan58, and at dstan_58.
Excellent. Well, we will make sure to pop a link down below in
cool. Thanks.
Video. And so if you have enjoyed what David has to say, go and check him out. And, you know, if you scroll down there, you'll pass quite a few other things. You'll pass a big empty comment section. Why don't you leave David a comment and let him know how much you've appreciated what you did today? There is also that like button. There's that subscribe button if you haven't already. There's a bell icon. You can hit that and be notified every time there is a new episode of Fully Booked. And, of course, there will be a brand new episode of Fully Booked coming out next week. So we look forward to you joining us then. Thank you so much